Good morning. This is Common Sense Matters program, sponsored by the Franklin County Democratic Party, live on radio 106.9 FM or live streamed on the internet at WCDT Radio. I'm Mike Lee, and today our topic will be gun reform in Tennessee. To separate truth from fantasy, I've asked Lieutenant Phil Henderson from the Tullahoma Police Department to join me to talk about his experience with firearm enforcement. He's a Winchester resident, and I know him as a presenter at the Citizens Police Academy in Tullahoma. Just to bring everybody up to date, Tennessee has gradually become one of the most gun-friendly states. At least 4 gun manufacturers have set up shop here because of the liberal gun laws. Throughout the years, we have had many mass shootings in Tennessee, but it all seemed to change when 3 children and 3 adults were murdered at the Covenant School in Nashville. Protest groups, mostly composed of moms, marched on the state capitol demanding gun reform. 3 Democratic representatives, 2 black men and 1 white woman, got caught up in the fervor of the protest and took to the House floor promoting the gun reform cause. After the 2 black representatives were expelled for violation of House decorum and the white woman was spared, cries of racism reached the national news. Governor Lee issued an executive order to fund schools to increase security, including measures to secure doors, closed circuit TV, and school resource officers. In the meantime, our state legislature adjourned without taking up any gun reform legislation. Governor Lee has asked the legislature to reconvene on August 21st to consider his proposal for an emergency order of protection, also known as a red flag law. There has been much pushback, mostly from the Tennessee Firearms Association, on any new gun reforms. Hello, Lieutenant Henderson. We certainly have a lot to talk about. Let me start by asking you, how long have you been with the Tullahoma Police Department?
I've been an officer for 30 years, and then 6 of those have 6 additional years in administration. So I've got a total of 36 years.
Over the years, have you found gun-related violence change in any way?
It's not been a major problem in Tullahoma. Just got to realize that every time we do go to a call, there is a gun involved. If there was not one there before we arrived, there is one there when we get there. So we just got to keep that in mind.
So in that case, what measures have you instituted or to keep your police officers safe and the public safe?
We conduct active shooter training on a regular basis, make our officers go have range time. We do training on dealing with mental health issues and people in crisis. We've just hosted a school in Tullahoma that was an active shooter instructor school. We had 5 officers go to that, so we have officers that are trained now that can go out and train other officers in the active shooter. And then we also have 4 officers right now that are trained to go out into the public, and go to businesses and teach them on the active shooter response for civilians.
A big item of interest nowadays is school safety. Does Tullahoma have any school resource officers or SROs?
We actually held interviews Tuesday. Our schools, Tullahoma has 7 schools. We had 1 SRO that was taking care of all 7 schools. With the new grant that Governor Lee put out, it gave us the opportunity to hire more SROs. And right now, like I say, we're in the process of hiring some. We've got now 6 of the schools covered. And with the school year starting, we will be using officers that are off duty to cover that one school that's still open until we get another SRO hired.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I wasn't sure whether the governor's funding reached to Tullahoma and Winchester or not. I guess we've all heard about the incident in Uvalde, Texas, where the police were overgunned by an assailant with an assault type rifle. How could the SROs protect themselves if they're confronted with a active shooter armed with an assault rifle?
We teach on our active shooter response, we teach single officer, double officer, triple officer response. Our policy is if you're the first one there, you're in the door and the rest of the officers play catch up. And we do have, some officers have access to cameras at the schools, so we can get real-time info and get that on our phones.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's good. Good planning. Under previous established laws, when threatened, you were first obligated to flee if you could. Say if you were armed as well. If you could not flee, then and you felt your life was threatened, you could use deadly force for self-defense. Tennessee has a stand your ground, is a stand your ground state. As it is now, there's no requirement to flee an attacker. When, under those circumstances, is deadly force justifiable?
When you're defending yourself or someone else from serious bodily injury or death, you can use deadly force
Even
to
though,
overcome that.
even if you can flee the
Yes.
situation? I always wondered. Why the police or the people defending themselves don't shoot the attacker in the leg or the arm instead of killing them. Is there a risk in that?
There is. We are trained from day one in the academy that everything is you shoot the biggest target. Biggest target, center mass. I mean, you hate to say it, but it's to eliminate the threat. If you shoot, every officer has to know what is behind their target. And if an officer goes to try to start, like shoot a leg or an arm or something like that, they have to know where that projectile is going if they miss. So they train center mass.
Okay, I see. I guess everybody has the right to defend their home, which is their castle. Does that mean that you could shoot an intruder first and then ask questions later? I guess we've heard of situations where a teenager knocked on the wrong door and had experienced deadly consequences. So how threatened does the person have to be of an intruder in their home to shoot?
Well, they would have to think that they were in danger of serious bodily harm or death, and not just open fire because somebody walked in the house or they heard the door open. Living here in Winchester, our door has always remained unlocked, until bedtime or whatever. But we've had kids, our kids grew up here, their friends run in and out the house. You just have to make sure that you identify who is entering your house before you do something that you would be seriously remorseful for doing if you were to pull the trigger.
How is it that now here in Tennessee, your car can be considered an extension of your castle? Sometimes it's referred to as guns in trunks situation.
Yeah.
So does that mean that you could use your gun a lot more quicker if you're in your car than you're out and about?
Tennessee Code Annotated 3917-1307 says that you can carry, gives you the right to carry your weapon in your vehicle. And as long as no one in the vehicle is doing anything illegal, you still have a right of an expectation of privacy in your vehicle. And if something were to happen, say somebody came up and tried to carjack you or rob you or whatever, you would still have the right to defend yourself and use that weapon.
Can a gun owner express his rights of gun ownership by threatening another by pointing a gun at them?
No. If it was just, say we were on the street and I pulled up beside you and I raised a gun and showed you the weapon, that would put you in imminent fear of bodily injury or death. And at that point, I would have committed aggravated assault. Guns are good if used correctly and treated accordingly. It's like people don't understand that once that trigger's pulled, there's no bringing it back. It's, now it's time to face the consequences.
I guess there's a saying that if guns were outlawed, only the outlaws would have guns. And guns have become part of the American heritage, throughout the Civil War, Revolutionary War, and the Wild West days. Do you know of anywhere where there is actually any discussion of totally outlawing guns? There's a few exceptions like schools and state parks. But do you know of any discussion where guns are considered to be totally banned?
Not that I know of. I know with certain paperwork and all, you can even transport weapons, guns on an airplane. They have to be locked away and check baggage, but I don't know if at this time of any place other than parks or schools that they would be banned. And then there are some legal defenses for having the weapon in a school or on school property or in a park.
How about in a bar where alcohol is being served?
If you're in the bar and you're not drinking, you can have one in there. Once you take that first drink, then you violated the law.
Okay, very interesting. Outlaw is another name for a criminal, and as such, a criminal would have a felony on their record. How could such a criminal actually obtain a gun?
That would be like they could get it through a third-party sale. Any licensed gun dealer is going to have to run a background check on you by law. Third-party sales do not require a background check, but the person that is selling the gun, if they sell it to a convicted felon and they can trace that back, then that person would be responsible for that sale.
So would a third party be like a private individual?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if a gun were bought from a private individual, would a background check be required?
No, not on a private sale. They can, like I say, they can sell the weapon to whoever they want, but they need to know the person that they're selling it to, because if they sell it to somebody that has a criminal record and is not legally able to purchase a firearm through a licensed dealer, then the person that sold it to them could be held liable.
If, say, a gun were recovered from a crime scene and the serial number were able to be retrieved, is there any way to trace that gun back to the original owner?
Yes, you could trace it back to the original owner. Then it would take some legwork to be able, if it was no longer his, you would have to do some legwork and find out who they sold it to, and then just start going down the path to find out how many hands this weapon had changed.
Would that also hold if the gun were purchased through a private sale?
Yes, it would give you the original owner. Like I say, then if they sold it to another person, if you go to the original owner, you would have to talk to him, find out who he sold it to, and then go to that person and find out who they sold it to. So, it could get to the point where somebody's going to not remember the person's name, who they sold it to.
Okay, that's what I figured. How about silencers? Are they legal?
Yes, sir. $200 tax stamp. You can purchase the stamp for the silencer, and then it would be whatever cost the silencer was. There's a mountain of paperwork that you have to fill out, and then you send that in to the state. Generally takes about 8 or 9 months to get this completed, and they do an extensive background check.
Do you have to have justification for owning a silencer?
No, sir.
Okay, because it seems like when a gun is fired, the repercussion from the gun notifies everybody in the area that something's happening. But if a silencer were used, it would, be silent.
Well, it's not completely silent, but it would bring the report of the weapon down quite a bit. You would hear a slight. It might sound like a .22 rifle going off, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. With the current Tennessee permitless carry, open or concealed carry, is a background check performed when the gun is purchased?
Yes. Background check is performed anytime that a weapon is purchased from a licensed dealer.
Okay.
They have to go through a background check.
A potentially good sales slogan would be, the more people that had guns, the safer we would be. However, in the U.S., we have enough guns to arm every man, woman, and child, yet gun death rate hasn't declined, as the slogan would suggest. Why do you think people having more guns is not working? Would less guns work better to solve gun violence?
I don't think so. Not everybody should own a gun. If you're not comfortable with using that weapon, or if you're scared of that weapon, or you don't know how that weapon works, then you shouldn't even touch it. And a lot of times people think they know how to use a weapon and end up doing something, I don't want to say stupid, but they do something that they're not familiar with the weapon and end up shooting themselves or shooting someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an accident, but if they knew how the weapon operated and treat every weapon as if it's loaded when they first see it. If they don't know anything about it, then they really don't need to be picking it up.
So with the open carry law in Tennessee, no training is required, as far as I understand. Doesn't that seem like that would create a hazardous situation if someone doesn't know what they're doing with a gun?
Yes, sir. Like I say, if most people come, if they come to us, they'll say, hey, how much training do I need? And it's really hard to tell, because different people have different, aptitudes with the weapon. So where one person, it could take 4 hours to get comfortable. Now, they may not know all the ins and outs of a weapon, but to get comfortable using it. And then some, it might take, 3 8-hour days in the classroom and on the range to be comfortable and proficient with that weapon.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is the most hazardous aspect of owning a gun without training?
I would say that would just have to be knowing where to store it, how to use it properly, how to maintain it, how to keep it clean, that kind of thing. But your biggest thing, I would say, would be, like I say, how to operate it, and then how to store it.
Okay. So the more guns principle would have teachers carry guns in school. Do you see any problem with that idea?
Yes. Again, that goes back to if you required teachers to carry firearms while they were in class or while they were on school property, if they're not comfortable with that weapon, or if they don't exactly know how that weapon works, then you have added to the problem. If they're not comfortable with it, if they don't know how it operates, then they shouldn't be carrying it. And then in the schools, if they did have it in the school system, they would need to have it on their person the entire time, because you don't want to leave it around where anybody else could get their hands on it and, God forbid, have an accident, somebody else pick it up, or a child pick it up, not knowing that it's real, and then end up doing something horrible
Mm-hmm.
to somebody else or themselves.
Okay, yeah, that's very good. Can a person possess a gun if they're using drugs? I guess in the news, so they're talking about Hunter Biden, who bought a gun when he was addicted to crack cocaine. Say the owner is not on drugs and they bought the gun, but later they got on drugs. What happens in that situation? Could the gun be confiscated?
The only way at this point that I know that the gun could be confiscated was if he was contacted on the street, was under the influence of something, and had the weapon with him. As far as going to their house, say they're out on the street, they've been arrested, there's no weapon with them, but that they own weapons. The only way that you would be able to do that would be to get a court order, go before the judge, explain the situation, and the judge could then issue an order or not issue an order for the guns to be taken. And generally, we would like for the person to turn those over to their attorney or whatever, and have the attorney turn them in, because it opens a whole new gambit of issues. If now you're sending officers to someone's house to take weapons, when the Second Amendment was written, it doesn't say anything about convicted felon not being able to possess a weapon. It doesn't say anything about anybody with a mental issue to be able to possess a weapon. It just says that you can possess a weapon. Those were things that were added along the way.
In Tennessee, if I understand the law correctly, there's no minimum age to possess a rifle or a shotgun. So if I'm correct, like a 5-year-old could be packing a high-power weapon. Is that true?
I've never seen it. You know, I mean, growing up, I went to Tullahoma. There was many days during school that, especially during hunting season, you know, we'd pull into the parking lot. The shotgun or the rifle would be on the rifle rack in the back window of the pickup trucks. You know, and that's where they stayed. I mean, it was just, that was part of growing up in the rural areas, you know, and I'm sure Franklin County was the same way, you know, back in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, I guess the culture has changed because guns used to be used primarily for hunting, but then when hunting kind of got less popular, then the trend was for self-defense purposes. So it's kind of like a different world nowadays than it used to be. Supposedly a wise man once said, the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And I would agree with that, certainly, if it applies to an armed and trained police officer. Now, there's other situations that get wrapped up into that. Does a good guy with a gun have an obligation to intercede if he finds himself uniquely holding the trigger to resolving a crime type situation? Does he have any obligation to use his firearm to resolve that type of situation?
No, they don't have a duty to intercede. As an officer, we do have a duty to intercede. But as a regular citizen, if he's not comfortable with, you know, maybe the area he's in, you know, whether it be a Kroger's or Food City or any of those, he's responsible for wherever that projectile, once it leaves the weapon, goes. If he misses who he's shooting at and he's not proficient enough with the weapon to eliminate what's going on, then it would be better for him to be a good witness than to do something that couldn't be undone.
Mm-hmm. Say another situation, hypothetical. A police officer arrives on the scene and sees the good guy with his weapon drawn. What could possibly happen there?
99.9% of all officers are going to start giving that person instructions on what they want them to do. You know, put the gun down, raise your hands, you know, and hopefully that person is going to follow those instructions, because the way the officer is going to respond from that point on is how the good guy with the gun responds to the instructions that he's given by the officer. Again, you know, if the good guy with the gun turns around and points the weapon at the officer, chances are it's going to get ugly real quick.
Uh-huh.
And so, you know, people need to understand where to point weapons. You know, we train extensively, you know, on the range. We've watched. I got the opportunity to come over and watch the Franklin County Sheriff's Department and Winchester TWRA do an active shooter drill here at the high school in Winchester, and it's it was unreal to see the number of people that were involved in that training, and each of them knew their own responsibilities, but they trained that day for several hours. And watching the officers, nobody flashed a muzzle at an officer in front of them or crossed over, and that just goes with the training. And a lot of people that own guns that carry them out here, that's part of the things that they don't think about is to, so if a guy's pointing a gun and then he hears somebody behind him saying drop the gun, he may inadvertently turn around and then that puts him in jeopardy of losing his life.
Yeah.
Just by not listening to what the commands are from that officer.
There's a train of wisdom that says that guns don't kill people, people kill people. But when people kill people, it's usually with a gun. If an unstable person is known to have access to guns, what could be done, if anything, to prevent a crime before it's been committed, as it stands right now?
Like I say, unless a crime's been committed or the person voluntarily gives up their weapons, not much can be done without a court order or without the family going before the court and giving up the weapons. We have on times in Tullahoma, if somebody has been admitted for psychiatric treatment, the family has brought this person's weapons to the police department. At that point, we take them into evidence, but we take them into evidence as personal property. It's not evidence of this person, having a mental episode. It's taken in for safekeeping. Then, we notify the family. They can go back before a judge, and the judge can issue an order for us to give those weapons back. But we just, we want to make sure that everybody's safe until this person gets over what's going on. It may be a temporary thing. It may just be due to life instances, the loss of a job or something along that line. And, everybody has a bad day. Somebody may say something that triggers a response from mental health that is not really a deep down issue.
If Tennessee passed a red flag law, we don't have one now, just from a legal standpoint, how would it coexist with the Second Amendment, which prevents infringement of owning a gun? From a legal point of view, I know this isn't in your lane, but which would take precedence, state or federal law, you think?
Federal law, I would say, would have to. I mean, a state cannot make a law that overrides federal law. They can make a law that restricts a federal law more narrowly to fit the state, but they can't overreach on federal law.
Okay. In today's vernacular, the word militia is usually associated with groups like the KKK or the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers. Does the Second Amendment mean to apply the term a well-regulated militia to supremacist groups or to, say, the Tennessee National Guard?
Well, a well-regulated militia, from what I've read and what I understand, means that the militia was in back then when it was written, was in an effective shape to fight. It didn't mean that the state was controlling the militia any certain way, but that the militia was prepared to do it with its duty. And then in U.S. Code Chapter 12. The militia of the United States consists of all able-bodied males at least 17 years of age and under 45 years of age who are or who have made declaration of the intention to become citizens of the United States and of the female citizens who are members of the National Guard. So to me, that would be the National Guard or any able-bodied man between the ages of 17 and 45 that were like, yes, I'm here to fight for the United States, and here's my oath to that.
Okay.
To me, you know, the KKK or the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, that's not according to law, the way it's written. They're not a militia. They're a group of people,
Vigilantes.
pretty much.
If Tennessee were to implement gun reforms to the maximum degree, say, in your opinion, how effective would, say, background checks on every gun sale be?
Well, like I say, you know, right now, every gun sale that is through a licensed dealer, there is a background check performed. We get calls, you know, several times a month where someone has tried to purchase a weapon at Dunham's or at one of the pawn shops, where we get something from the TBI that says, you know, hey, this person's down there to buy a weapon. There are warrants on them, or they've been denied because of these charges. And we'll just go down there and check and make sure, you know, if they have charges on them, then we make an arrest. If they have just been denied, we'll go down there and just make sure everything's going good and move on. But like I say, the only time that there would not be a background check would be if it was a third-party sale.
Mm. So if it were a third-party sale and the background checks were enforced for 100% of the gun sales, could the third party go to a licensed dealer and have the background check performed?
They probably could to pay the fee, and the licensed dealer may charge an extra fee to that person for running the check on the person that's actually going to be. Because right now, a background check I think is $10 per weapon, or $10 per check, and so you know they may charge the third-party seller a fee.
I don't know if we have this or not, but a waiting period for gun purchases, do we have such a thing?
Not that I'm aware of.
So it's an instant background check?
Well, it's an instant now, and they may say, you know, come back in 2 hours or whatever. They'll send it off, but most of the time it's pretty quick on the background check through the state.
So if there were a waiting period, say 4 days, wouldn't that give a chance to have a more thorough background check?
Yeah, it would. It would give them more time. I know that's one of the reasons on the purchase of the silencers, suppressors. You know, you fill out the paperwork, two fingerprint cards. One of the fingerprint cards goes to the state. The state then forwards the second set to the FBI to do a national check. So you have to wait till all those get back before they'll actually give you the stamp for the suppressors or the silencers.
Okay. Another thing that can be implemented here in Tennessee is a ban on bump stocks and high capacity magazines. I would imagine that would cut down on the number of people that could get killed per minute.
High capacity magazines, I mean, I don't know why anyone would need a 50 or 60 round you know, magazine. But like, you know, what officers carry, I mean, we carry 9mm, we've got 17 rounds in the weapon. But anybody that's proficient with a revolver and has the tools, you know, to, you know, speed loaders and speed strips and that kind of thing, some of them that are proficient can get off 12 to 18 shots almost as quick as somebody with you know, with a semi-automatic handgun. So I mean, you can, you know, I mean, the high capacity magazines, they were banned for a while. Only law enforcement could get them, and then that ban was dropped. The bump stocks, it's my understanding that those have been taken off the market, the bump stocks.
What is a bump stock, just out of curiosity?
I've never seen one. I mean, you know, it doesn't interest, those don't interest me, but it's just a faster way. It reacts with your shoulder and the recoil of the weapon to reset the weapon. It's my understanding.
Okay.
But now, like I say, I'm not.
So it's a way that the recoil of the weapon ties back to the trigger? Okay. A ban on assault weapons, would that be effective in cutting down on gun violence? In fact, what would a person need an assault rifle for in you know, civil society?
I don't know that they need them, you know, as a need. But, you know, I mean, do we need cars that run 200 mile an hour? I mean, you know, it's like, if it's out there and you've got the money to purchase it, I mean, you know, I'm not one that's gonna say, you know, you can't have it just because Bob on A Street doesn't want you to have it. I mean, you know, if they know how to use it and they have the means to purchase it, and, you know, I can't control what's going on in somebody else's mind. So, you know, it would be hard for me to say, yeah, ban all of them. And that's just a personal, you know, personal thing for me.
Yeah, I stopped at Outpost Armory and looked at the guns, and the assault rifles were selling for over $2,000. And you kind of wonder who would pay that much for a gun. How about safe storage laws? You hear a lot about kids getting hold of a gun. Would that be an effective thing to have without infringing on anybody's rights?
Oh yeah, most definitely. We most departments in and around here, I know we've gone through just about all we had, but we had gun locks that all you had to do was come to the station and ask for a gun lock, and
that locks the trigger.
It locks. We had them that locked the trigger. We had them that locked the slide back. We had them that you could run through AR style rifles. You know, and you came up to the station, you said, hey, I have 4 guns or I have 5 guns, and we would give you that number of locks free of charge. I mean, here you go, just please use them. And we're down now to probably maybe 6 left. You know, I mean, safe storage, gun safes, they make small safes that you can put a gun, you know, put your weapons in. They make them that are based on your hand size. You know, you put it on top of the lock and it unlocks it, so a small child couldn't go up there and actually lay their hand on top of it and unlock it. You know, if you can't lock it, just make sure that it's out of sight, because most of the time with small kids out of sight, out of mind. high up in the closets, you know, move it occasionally. But yeah, safe storage is top priority.
I've kind of run into some people that they would say that the pushback on safe storage is that if you need the gun, you need it now. You don't want to unlock it or load it.
You know, I mean, and I know it's not just at night, but most days our doors are unlocked. Once the sun goes down, we lock our doors. To me, camera system is, you know, I can see who's approaching my house from any angle. So it's, you know, it's, I would rather be safe than sorry. I have 2 grandkids right now, and I don't know what I would do, you know, if something happened and they got hold of of either, you know, one of my weapons.
Yeah, I think that's been established that it's more dangerous to have a gun in the house than not have a gun when you have kids. I guess the age limit for buying a gun in Tennessee changes for whether it's a rifle or a pistol or an assault rifle, and it also changes based on age. But if everybody had to be 21 years old to buy a gun, would that make the state safer? In other words, could an 18-year-old, or yeah, I guess 18-year-old is the lowest age you could buy a gun, a rifle.
Yeah,
or
rifle or shotgun, 18 years old.
Is that a high enough age, you think?
Personally, I do. I mean, we've got 18-year-old, and I'll say kids, 18-year-old kids that are joining the military and going to, you know, Iraq, Afghanistan, you know, wherever. And we're handing them fully automatic weapons and tanks and, you know, that kind of thing to go fight on foreign soil, but yet when they come back here, they can't buy a weapon. You know, that just, to me, that makes no sense, because they're fighting to keep our freedoms and our liberties intact, but we're going to take it back from them once they get back. To me, if an 18-year-old, like I say, there's 18-year-olds in the military, they do have more liberties than an 18-year-old that's not in the military. But, you know, with the stipulation that they've got now, I think an 18-year-old, like I say, in the military should have more rights than an 18-year-old that's
just getting out of high school.
Just getting out of high school, yes, sir.
Well, I think we have time to investigate one of these case studies, and I think maybe you might be involved with some of these. I'm not sure, but back. Okay, that's case 2. Let me get case 1. Okay, March 24th this year, a man is facing aggravated assault charges after a hours-long standoff with police at a Tullahoma apartment complex Thursday afternoon. According to Tullahoma police, the incident began as a domestic call in a mid-afternoon hours. The police arrived. The 50-year-old man was having a tense conversation with the apartment manager. Police then realized the man was holding a revolver in his right hand, which he then aimed at his head. Police Chief Jason Williams told News 2 that he can't speak highly enough of the partnership between his officers in the Coffee County Sheriff's Office and the district attorney's investigators who helped negotiate with the man for about 2.5 hours to resolve the situation peacefully. I'm thankful it ended that way, Williams said. I can't brag enough on our men and women, the DA's office and the sheriff's office, and the restraint our men and women showed. During the tense negotiations, Williams said the man fired a round up into the air, but officers on the scene remained poised and showed composure while they continued to negotiate with the man. Fortunately, we were all able to talk him down, he said. The man is now getting crisis help in Nashville, according to Williams, though he will face 2 counts of aggravated assault in relation to the incident. Now I'm wondering, would a red flag law have prevented this situation? I think you may have been involved with this case.
I was. I can't really get into the specifics because I don't know if this case has been gone all the way through court. But on this, on this particular one, I don't think that he was actually in crisis prior to this happening. I think it was a bunch of things that happened in a very short period of time that got him to this point.
This was unpredictable beforehand.
Yes.
What happened to his gun? Was it confiscated or returned to him, or at least his house, or what happened?
It's in evidence.
Evidence as part of the case.
Yes, it's part of the case.
Okay, so he was taken to the hospital. Was his crisis help voluntary or involuntary? Was that part of him being arrested that he had to go to the hospital?
It was my understanding on that day that he wanted help, and Sheriff Parton actually transported him personally to Nashville, to Vanderbilt.
Okay. Otherwise, would he have been arrested?
He would have been taken for mental evaluation before being transported to the jail.
Anyhow, okay.
Yes.
Okay. So after his mental evaluation at the hospital, would he still have faced having to post bond or be held in jail?
After released, yes, he would be transported to the jail and then have to make bond and then appear in court.
Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Are we pretty close to the end?
We got 2 minutes.
10 minutes? 2 minutes. Okay. Let's see if we can get through this case. One person is in custody and another has died as a result of an alleged shooting that took place in Tullahoma Saturday evening. According to Tullahoma police officers responding to Ada Farrell apartment complex at 8:12 p.m. Saturday, after 9/11 received multiple calls regarding people shooting guns at the apartment complex. Officers arrived to find a male victim with apparent gunshot wounds in the parking lot. Officers were able to identify a nearby white male who was armed. Officers detained the male, later identified as Norman Paul Adams, age 62. According to statements from those at the scene, Tullahoma Police Department determined that Adams Jr. was responsible for the shooting. The gunshot victim later died from his wounds. He has been identified as Alex North, age 28, of Tullahoma. Adams Jr. was charged with first-degree murder. Okay, questions. Did Adams, to your knowledge, I don't know if you were involved with this one, did Adams possess the gun legally?
Yes.
He did.
Yes, he did.
Was the shooter suffering from mental illness from what could be?
No, sir.
No, he was just enraged about something.
He thought he was doing what was right, which turned out to be it was a misunderstanding on his part to where he shot somebody he shouldn't have shot.
Okay, and the person died. If the victim were armed, could the situation have turned out differently?
Yes.
The victim could have protected himself, you think? Okay. How about, could a armed bystander have legally resolved the issue?
That case, that was what Mr. Adams thought he was doing,
Oh, okay.
which in turn wasn't correct.
So was it that the victim was actually assaulting someone else, and Mr. Adams tried to intercede?
The victim was actually going after somebody who was assaulting somebody,
Oh, okay.
who had assaulted somebody.
Wow.
So the victim was trying to be the good Samaritan, and then Mr. Adams shot the good Samaritan.
Wow. Wow. How do you untangle a situation like that when you come on the scene?
It was several weeks.
Well, I really appreciate you coming here, Lieutenant Henderson. I think we've learned a lot about the gun laws in Tennessee, even with all the revisions that have taken place and the new revisions that will be coming about. So this is Common Sense Matters, the monthly program sponsored by the Franklin County Democratic Party.